guys, we're back. It's another episode of the Fearless Pursuit of Freedom podcast. And today's guest is a high-level entrepreneur out of the Chandler area, right? Chandler is where you're at?
Chandler, yes. Arizona.
Chandler, Arizona. I'd like to introduce you guys to Troy Fullwood. Appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here today. It's when you reached out to me, I was really excited because I know you've got an amazing audience of people that are in the business on both the wholesaling side as well as the realtor side of the space. And what I'm here to share today is really something that can benefit both, and how to use it in your, I would call it your toolbox of resources for building generational wealth. So I'm excited to share some stuff with you guys today.
Well, I like generational wealth.
Absolutely. You know, speaking of generational, I saw something yesterday. What was it? It was a comment, and I can't even remember where I saw it, but it was in, I don't know, some feed or something that came across my desk. It was like, you wouldn't be working today if somebody would have built generational wealth before you.
Right.
I thought, wow, isn't that a true statement for all of us, no matter what age we are, as in our, I would call our season of life. Hold on, my computer's doing things I don't want it to do. That our parents or grandparents, aunts, uncles, great grandparents, whatever, obviously did the best they could, and some of them succeeded at a different level than others, but they did the best they could, but they kind of missed the mark oftentimes on building that generational wealth to ultimately, make the next generation or their kids, provide their kids with a better, lifestyle than they had for themselves. And I want to share with everybody today, how you can start that process and start building that momentum for yourself. And obviously you can decide how you want to pass it down or hand it off after you build it. So we're here today to do just that. So it's exciting.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. In regards to generational wealth, what is your plan to hand down your empire to the kids? Is it, boom, here's this thing, figure it out? Or do you, because for me, I'm a hard worker, and I grew up not spoiled at all. We didn't have a whole lot of money. And I feel torn between handing the girls a serious amount of money and then them squandering it with partying, or, they're not the partying type. They're only 13, but, I've never thought of a way to hand somebody such power, because it is power. So if you literally never have to work again, for me, I'm 32 now, I would just travel the world and help as many people as I can. But if you hand an 18-year-old, millions of dollars or all these assets, how do you have a structure in how you're going to protect them from just going haywire with it?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So my plan personally is putting things in our family trust, and we'll continue to build up that family trust. So if something happens to me, it'll go automatically to my wife, and then she'll manage it out. If something happens to her, then it will go on to the children. I don't have any intention of just stopping what I'm doing and giving all my money to my children at age 20 or 18. That'll never happen. I think it's imperative that, number one, that if they are interested in the business, then great, come alongside and we'll show you how to build. We'll show them how to build their own. Having 4 boys, from the ages of 18 to 6-year-old twins, I'll help them build their own business and navigate through it so they can start building up their own. But the overall idea is really waiting till they're at a certain age, typically around 30 is what I'm thinking, maybe 35, and then slowly start handing out small fractions of the overall wealth to them. But in the meantime, allowing that wealth to continue to build up in the background. If there's still companies intact and running, we'll bring on staff and personnel and people to run those companies who are of like-mindedness as well as maturity level and understand that industry. Now, if it so happens that my children come up in that, I say that stream or that path, and they want to get involved in the business, then they'll start at the bottom and they'll work their way up, just like everybody else in the company does. So it's not, my goal and my objective is not to hand them a silver platter, but it really is to build character within them and great work ethics around them. And then even on top of that, to help them build like a service mindset. So in other words, go out and so this last weekend I was down in Mexico, and I went down there with 68 guys. It was just an all-guy trip. We went down there, and we got down there Friday. Some of us got down there earlier than others. So I got down there about noon on Friday. So I had a chance to just kind of put my feet in the sand and enjoy the ocean and relax. But Saturday was an all-day construction day. So we were building all kinds of things. We were building a women's shelter. We were painting a community center. We were building a big shed structure for another project. We were just doing a lot of different things. Even for guys who were older in nature, who physically really couldn't swing hammers and stuff, they went down the road to where the local Boy Scouts were trying to raise money. And they teamed up with the Boy Scouts and raised like $1,000 in this bar called Manny's. And a bunch of Americans down there drinking, watching the Kentucky Derby, celebrating Cinco de Mayo. They raised over $1,000 from people just sitting in the bar.
Really?
Yeah, for this local Boy Scout troop. My point being in all of that is I want my children to have that same heart of gold to go down and be of service to people, I say, who are in a different season of life. I wouldn't say less blessed or anything like that, but just in a different season of life. And I've been doing that for years with my boys, where I take them down to Mexico to open their eyes to a different world. You know, we live here in the U.S. and, you know, we live in the houses we live in. We turn on the faucet, water comes out. We turn on the light switch, electricity comes on. You know, I mean, God forbid if we had anything less than a high-speed internet into our houses or to our phones. I mean, even
right.
phones right now are like 5G. We got to have 5G now.
Yeah.
And that's how we live. And what's interesting is down there in Rocky Point, that entire city has 7 water wells, 4 of which don't work because of salt, seawater getting into them and contaminating them. 3 which do. So you got an entire city which is used to functioning off of 7, now operating off of 3. And they're just like, okay, no big deal. Whereas we Americans would lose our mind if we turned on the faucet and water didn't come out, or if water came out in a different color other than clear out of our faucet. So for me, it's really not about just what I've done and just giving it to them. It's really about what I've done was a gift or a skill set that I learned. And my kids are going to have different gifts. They're going to have different skill sets. They're going to have different passions. And I definitely want them to follow those things. And I can come alongside while I'm alive and do things with them and for them to assist them, whether that's education or skill set or, helping them be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly isn't about me saying you have to do this. That's not the approach I'm taking personally. And it certainly isn't about robbing them from, what's on their heart to do.
Right.
At the end of the day. But what I do is what I love to do. And that's, buy and sell notes, do capital raises and things like that. That's my passion. That's something that I've become, they say, effective at. And so I like to stay in my lane. I see a lot of people out there doing fix and flips and things like that. And I think it's fantastic. That's just not my cup of tea at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore I can come alongside those folks and support them in what they're doing and ultimately feel good about it at the end of the day.
Right. I couldn't help but smile there for a second. you were saying single family flipping wasn't your cup of tea, and I'm like, it's not really mine either. I wish I could get out of this. So,
well, like my dad, he's 72, and he still works to this day, not because he has to, but because he wants to.
yeah.
And they live in a 55 and older community, and he's kind of like the neighborhood. There's like 700 units or something in there, like some ridiculous number. It's a big one. He's like the local neighborhood handyman. And so there's a lot of widowed people that live in there. And so he'll go over there and change simple things like light bulbs and fix leaky faucets. But he does that, and then he works at Ace Hardware because he just likes doing those things. And then he flips about one house a year. We'll go out and buy him a house, and I hear Dad go rehab this house because it keeps him sharp and he likes doing it. He's by no means Speedy Gonzalez at it. He's very much a perfectionist, but he doesn't do it to make money or to make a living. He does it to keep himself busy and to, doing something that he loves to do. And he just remodeled their house. It's been like a 1.5-year project. They've been doing different things, and he's been doing different things, and they're more or less cosmetic stuff. But he did hang drywall and tape and textured and did electrical and plumbing and things like that. But so the cool thing about it is that, even at that age, he's still doing it and having fun and getting some sense of satisfaction out of it. So
Right.
That's great. That's great. Some people just like doing that. Awesome.
All right. So you told me beforehand, you've been in real estate 22, 23 years.
Yep.
And now you're in the note space. Tell us, did you start 22 years ago in notes, or was it a gradual progression from the stuff you thought you needed to do, and then you're finally the aha moment that notes were the way to go?
So when I started looking into real estate to get started, I knew I had no interest in fixing and flipping houses.
Okay.
And it's because of my childhood, to be frankly honest with you. So when I would get in trouble in high school, and I know there's people out there like, you got in trouble? I'm like, yeah, like none of you people ever got in trouble. In high school, the punishment, like if I got suspended for a day or two, whatever, for fighting or doing something foolish that high schoolers do, the punishment was I had to paint a room in the house, like the kitchen or the family room or the living room. And I became like really good at painting. And I say that because I did it quite a few times. So when I started looking at real estate and people were talking about fixing and flipping and painting and all those other stuff, I'm like, no, thank you. I have no interest in that. And so therefore I just kind of looked the other direction. But as I dove deeper and deeper into what are the different aspects of real estate, like what are the different industries within the industry, the number one thing that stood out for me was debt and mortgage buying and mortgage wholesaling. And as I dug deeper and deeper into it, there was a light bulb moment for me when I would look around the city. At the time I was in San Antonio, Texas when I got started. I would look around the downtown area, and I noticed that all the high-rise buildings had banking institutional names on them. I'm like, okay, well, you don't see any high-rise buildings with house flipper names on it. You see the banks, and I'm going, what's going on here? And then I started looking at other cities like Phoenix and Dallas and Houston. And sure enough, it was the case in every single city. I'm like, what is it that makes them money? Like at the end of the day, because it's not just your savings account or my savings account or the fact we have a checking account or the fact we have a CD at a bank or an institution. It was really about the fact that they were in the lending space. They would make money lending. And some of us look at it, well, they make a point or two, or they do no-cost loans, which, by the way, there's no such thing as a no-cost loan. They just hide the money better. And started realizing, okay, they're just doing massive volume. Like they're doing billions and billions of dollars per month in loan origination. Like to give you an idea, and that's stated during the crisis, countrywide, had a $75 billion warehouse line of credit for loan origination. And they were financing or underwriting and funding 72 to 73 billion dollars a month in loan origination. So that was the volume. That was all subprime. That was just subprime stuff, and they were just one player in that big space. That being said, I was looking at how do I get in that space, and the easiest entry point into that space I found was to buy notes with seller financing. So people would fix up their house, they would buy it, they'd fix it up, they'd sell it with seller financing, and then they'd have this mortgage or note, and they'd want to sell it to get their cash out and then go do it again, because that was their model. They didn't really have a model for, managing the note or maintaining the cash flow or anything like that. They did it because that buyer who bought their house was not institutional quality, so they couldn't get institutional financing for whatever the reason. It's not just credit. A lot of times it's because they're self-employed, or they haven't been at their job for a very long period of time, or they don't necessarily have the entire down payment that the bank might require, or some people just hate banks. At the end of the day, they don't want anything to do with the bank.
Right.
And, I've seen it in all shapes and sizes. But the point being is that was the direction I went. And the more and more I got into that space, the more and more it just made financial sense for me personally to go out and buy debt and then make money off that debt. Now, we buy everything at a discount, excuse me, and therefore we maintain yields of anywhere between 8 to 12, 8 to 13% on the deals that we buy. To me, that was more along the lines of being a bank than it was being a fix, flip, or fix and rent type model. The other thing about that entire scenario, and I've said this over and over again, is that if banks banks are not in the real estate space. They have no interest in being in the real estate space. And to confirm what I just said there, their REO departments are a huge, drain on capital. And they don't like having an REO department. They don't like having a loss mitigation department. Now, yes, they can be difficult to work with sometimes, but at the end of the day, it doesn't benefit them to have non-performing assets on their books. They like lending money, they like collecting money, and they like going on their private jets to fancy islands around the world. That's what they like doing.
Of course.
They wanted to be in the fix and flip, or the apartment business, or the storage rental business, or the land development business. They could very easily do it, but they have no interest in it whatsoever. And so they leave it for people like you and I and other people listening to go out there and build our own wealth by doing it based on what we want to accomplish. So there are people out there listening that love the fix and flip space. There are people out there that love the multifamily, the storage unit space, whatever it may be. And they leave that as an open door for us to go out there and grab hold of that. And they're more than happy to lend us money to go do those things if we fit within their parameters at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not the one out there originating these loans. I think I'm correct in this assumption. You're out there networking, finding other investors or homeowners that are creating the notes, and you're buying them. So
exactly. Yeah, we don't do any loan origination when it comes to seller financing or SFR at all.
Yeah. So, for example, if I bought a house for 70, rehabbed it, owner financed to somebody for 130, and I put 20 in the rehab, so I'm all into it for 90. You would buy it at 100 if it's worth 130. At something like that. Yeah.
We'd probably buy it for anywhere between 100 to 108.
Yeah.
Depending upon the quality of the borrower and the down payment of the borrower, which brings up a great topic. So one of the things that we love doing is coming alongside folks that are out there doing the fix and flip fix and rent, buy, hold type models. And especially when they start navigating into the area of seller financing. And we love coming alongside them and showing them how to kind of develop and build their own financing division for two reasons. Number one, it helps them to build cash flow. But number two, it also helps them to build an asset portfolio that creates generational wealth for them. The other thing is that we can help them put together good quality deals that if they need to exit out of that deal for whatever the reason, they can do that. Now, oftentimes when I'm talking to people like, well, why would I ever sell something that's performing and creating cash flow? Because there's this thing called life that we all live. And life has a way of making turns that we don't plan on. Whether people end up going through a divorce, or there's a death in the family, or they extend themselves out too far, whatever it may be, life has a way of serving those types of events up to us. Now, some people say that's a choice. Some people say it's the universe. Some people say it's whatever. At the end of the day, it's still life. And so therefore, the fact that I've seen that happen over and over and over again throughout people's lives, I always tell them to plan in the event that something does happen. So you can exit out of it, capture your cash, replenish whatever you need to replenish, fix whatever you need to fix, and then go forward. Like case in point, our family right now is dealing with my wife's mom, who is in New York in the hospital and has been since for 2 weeks now. Completely unexpected situation. She flies to New York to spend Easter with her brother and her other friends and stuff, and ultimately ends up in the hospital because she's got a blocked intestine. Unexpected. But there's thousands and tens of thousands of dollars going into that deal on top of airfare, hotel, rental cars, and everything else going down right now. And grateful that we have the money to make that happen for them and with them, and they've got their own money as well. But completely unexpected, just happens. So, and we're all subject and prone to those things. But so to give people kind of a real, what I would call best practices model that they can take away from today's call. Number one, when you're doing seller financing, however you do your marketing, whether you do it on Craigslist or you do it on the internet, your website, email blast, mailers, use a realtor to sell your property. Number one, find a buyer that's got a 600 or better credit score. Okay, ideally, you can push it down to 575 with more down payment, but 600 or better is usually perfect. If it's below that, I would not sell the house to them. You could choose to maybe rent the house to them and then help them clean up their credit, because I'm also a realist in the sense that the majority of things on people's credit reports, I think statistically speaking, about 78% of the stuff on people's credit reports is inaccurate. So I understand that part of the business, but that person, that individual has to clean up their own credit report. I can't do it. You can't do it. We can point them in the right direction. We can set them up with companies that can help them. And but until they get that cleaned up, I wouldn't sell them the house. And I'll come back to that here in a minute as to why. Number two, I'd make sure they've got at least 10% down on the house. Whatever your sales price is, I'd make sure they have at least 10% of that. I wouldn't give a discount on the sales price, but I wouldn't oversell the property based on its value. So if the value of the property is 150, and that's because I've run comps or done an appraisal or BPO, or reached out to people like you that can do those things for me, then that would be my sales price. And with seller financing, that's the price. I'm not lowering that any lower, because ultimately I'm going to take a discount on the sale of the note when and if I choose to sell them. So 10% down. The reason people have to have skin in the game is the same reason that when you and I bought our first bike, we took better care of it than the bike that we got as a Christmas gift or a birthday present. And that's just a fact for all of us. You know, if kids were given their first car, they treated that completely different than when they bought their first car at the end of the day. So they've got skin in the game. And that ties into a more of a ownership mindset versus, no big deal type of a mindset. Number three, I would definitely do, 10, 20, 30-year terms on the deal. The shorter the term, the better, but also the shorter the term, the higher the payment. And that may be outside of their financial capacity. So you want to be sensitive to that at the end of the day. And then number four, I would make sure that the interest rate was somewhere between 7 and 9% on the deal. I wouldn't do it at 3% or 4%. If the banks are out there lending money at 4% today, I wouldn't try and compete with the banks. Number one, you're not the bank. I'm not the bank. We don't have that volume model of doing billions of dollars every month and making 1 to 2 points on each deal that we do. That's a huge model, makes them a lot of money. But we don't have that. We don't have that system in place. So there's no reason to compete with that. But doing that 7 to 9% will minimize the note seller's discount when they go to sell. Number five, well, definitely I would pull credit on the borrower. If you don't have a credit service third-party credit provider, I would set one up. If you're listening to this and you still haven't set one up and somebody comes to you and wants to buy your house, I would have them go to a service like freecreditreport.com or Credit Karma, have them give you a copy of a scored credit report, and then make a decision off of that. At the end of the day, that's one way of kind of, they say, engaging them. Understand that. And the next thing I would do is I'd also hire an RMLO, a residential mortgage loan originator, to underwrite the file for me. One, that keeps you Dodd-Frank compliant based on current laws and restrictions. And two, it'll give you a full package that you can now, I say, store in your office or safekeeping place. And then when and if you go to sell it, you can hand that package off to the next buyer, and he or she will be able to, manage that asset. The next thing I would also do is have a servicing company service your loan for you. A lot of times people, Troy, I got this, I can do this. And I understand people's desire to want to do those things because they get their money faster. Here's the problem with that. Number one, you're in violation of federal law because you're not a licensed servicer. Number two, when it comes time to sell that note, let's say it's 4 or 5 years down the road. Well, any note buyer that comes to you to buy it is going to say, well, give me the last 12 months worth of pay history. And now all of a sudden you got to go back and dig out bank statements, savings account statements, showing where you deposited this money. And if they happen to pay you in cash because you're in the same town that they are, chances are you just took the cash and put it in your pocket and you went on your day. I've seen it happen more times than not. So now you have no tracing of that whatsoever. And now you're trying to piecemeal a timeline or a pay history together that will take you 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, maybe even a couple of days to put together, especially if you change banks and bank accounts and everything else over that time period. That just adds another dimension of challenge to it. There's a servicing company can do it for $10 a month. And when you get ready to sell it, you go to the website, their portal that they created for you, print off the pay history, you email it to the note buyer, done, end of discussion. It adds value to your deal overall.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, the servicing fees from what I've known, and I don't have any notes, but they're nominal, and that we're not only will relinquish a lot of your headache, but it will keep that record for you because not everybody keeps good records. And then I know a lot of investors that will have the homeowners pay that servicing fee with their, so why not? I mean, even if it was $40, why not just have them cover it?
Yeah, if you think about it, if your average servicing fee is, say, let's just say easy $10 a month, you're spending $120 a year for a third-party servicing company that not only tracks all your payments, they make sure the check clears before they send you your money. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the year, they issue year-end interest statements to the borrower, which typically is the largest single deduction that people have on their tax returns is mortgage interest. And so they handle all of that, and then they just send the paperwork to you, and you get to apply that to your tax returns. It just makes life really easy. Not to mention, it helps you to create a lifestyle for going on to the next deal, traveling, whatever it is your passion is. It's all turnkey, and it's all cloud-based at the end.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like a full-time employee that gets paid nothing, basically.
Well, they get paid for doing
it's about free. Yeah.
yeah. It's based on results. They get paid for doing their work, and as well as if let's say the people default, they can help you find legal counsel to do a foreclosure if in fact you have to go that route.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no problem. I would call John's law firm in Toledo, Ohio, and here's his number, and go forward from there. They'll even initiate it for you.
Right. Well, I don't want to talk about notes too much because you mentioned quite a few other things.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned the realtor thing. We hadn't, even before the show, we hadn't talked about that too much. And then in the very beginning, you talked about raising capital. And now I assume you raised capital for your note buying. So I'd be interested to learn how you do that. And in what fashion are you building a hedge or a small fund for that? Or is it property to property or how that works? And then how you're helping realtors as well.
Yeah. So let's tackle the realtor thing real quick. Okay. And then we'll just go on to the capital. So one of the things that I see as a huge opportunity for realtors in the marketplace is selling properties with seller financing. Now, what I'm referring to are properties that they've had as maybe long-term listings, like 6+ months. They've been on the books and they've put marketing dollars and time and energy and meetings and all this stuff into that property. And it's really not going anywhere. And it might even be, how do you say, priced okay for the market, but maybe it's the condition of the property, or maybe its location is not so sweet. Or maybe they've had a couple of buyers that have fallen out of escrow. They've come to the table, and for whatever the reason, something happens during the mortgage, origination process. And to go back to those people and sit down, first off, I would sit down with the home seller and say, okay, Bob Smith over here wanted to buy this house, and they couldn't buy it because he wasn't on his job for 2+ years. So the bank said no. But he's got 20% to put down or 10% to put down, so he's got substantial down payment. And ultimately, they can sell that property to them, to Bob, and the seller can carry back a note, which creates generational wealth. And they can even do it in the form of a wrap. So even if there's an underlying lien, now I know there's various things being discussed in Texas that are discussing the whole wrap model and things like that. And it looks like they're going to get some guidelines. Just follow the guidelines. And you'll be able to create what's a wrap mortgage, which is basically the home seller owes $100,000 to the bank. They sell it for $250,000. The buyer puts down $50,000. They carry back a note for $200,000, and ultimately they use that payment on the $200,000 to pay the payment on the $100,000, and they keep the margin spread, which is nothing different than being a landlord at the end of the day. And you can set that kind of model up with a servicing company that will do all that. All those steps for you. A little bit more expensive, but not impossible. Here's the thing that I get from most realtors. Number one question they want to know is, how do I get paid? Okay.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah. And it's a valid question. And I certainly have a high respect for it. It's simple. That down payment money that seller is getting, that 10%, 20% down, whatever it may be, that's where their 6% fee. I'm just going to use 6% as a number because it's pretty common in the space. Their 6% fee comes out of that 10% down payment. So they're still getting paid, but they're facilitating that entire transaction, setting the seller up with cash flow and generational wealth, because there's typically 10, 20, 30-year terms. And if they want to sell the note, they can call somebody like me over here at Pinnacle Investments, and we'll come alongside and buy the note from the seller. It can operate like an annuity type thing, where they can sell a portion or they can sell all of it. And Therefore, it becomes win-win-win for everybody in the space. They can use an RMLO to do all the paperwork and set it up properly. It's about, I don't know, $500 to $1,000, depending upon who you use and where the property's at, and close it through a title company, as they should. Put in title policy in place, lenders and owners title policy, and move forward. That's a way of salvaging deals that have been on the books for extended periods of time, and at least creating opportunity for that home seller to at least have another choice in the matter. And even if they want to think about it for a month or two, they want to just keep it on the market, see what happens. If they plant that seed, it'll grow for them as a client versus that client throwing their hands up in the air and saying, you know what, we're going to just find a better realtor. Which happens a lot of times. The listings expired, nothing happens. The realtor loses that listing. Somebody else comes along. Next thing you know, it gets sold some other way, some other fashion. Now, I certainly agree there's a lot of moving things as a realtor. Sometimes homes are overpriced. The seller loves Zillow, and Zillow doesn't tell them what their house is really worth. And so I get all those other pieces. But these really, seller financing really applies to those, what I would call, long-term listing clients that, you've had the home showings, you've done the marketing, you've done all that stuff, and here's another option. So it's a way of salvaging deals. And if you think about it, if rather than losing 10 expired listings a year, if they could save 2 or 3 of them with seller financing, that would certainly, minimize their losses for marketing and things like that, and just put more money in their pocket.
Right. And it's not a long-term deal for the homeowners, because 6-12 months down the road, they can sell somebody the note and they're out of the whole deal and they can move on. Or like you said a second ago, as a portion of it, they can sell off the first half or the trailing second half. Or I know it can get super creative, something that I haven't dug into too much, but it's not a 30-year commitment to somebody necessarily. They could hang on to the note for 5 years or whatever.
Absolutely. We buy a lot of newly created notes. So we'll buy a newly created note 30 days after it's created. And we'll price it out even before it's created. So if you brought me a deal, I know you're in the realtor space. If you brought me a deal and said, Troy, here's the buyer, here's the seller, here's the house, here's what we're thinking term-wise, here's the borrower's credit, what would you price this for? And I would give you a price up front based on these characteristics. And I would also, if there was room for improvement, I would say, if we can move the interest rate up a little bit, or we can shorten the term a little bit, it would put X more dollars on the table. To me, that gives a seller an option after it's sold, and it answers a lot of questions for the seller. When and if they want to sell it, what it would be worth. And it gives you, another exit strategy for them, saying, hey, if we do this, then Troy over here will buy it at this, and we'll sign a contract to buy it based on these conditions and these terms being met on the deal, which is usually, if you're bringing it to me and it's got 30-year terms at an 8% rate with a 620 borrower and 10% down, here's your price. You got to stick to those terms. If you change the terms or the borrower's credit drops or they put less money down, then we're going to change the price on you. Right.
Yeah. So we got to coach them, as always, to not buy a car a week before closing.
Same rules. Yeah, absolutely.
Same deal.
Yeah. So, and we love doing that stuff because, one, it helps us to help them, and we want to buy quality stuff. One of the most frustrating things about our business is when people bring us things and they never pulled credit on the borrower. They got 5% down. They got a 4% interest rate. I've seen them where they're written for 40-year terms. And then they bring them to us and they're like, buy this. And it's like, well, the borrower here is such high risk that it's only ultimately going to result in a foreclosure. And we're not interested in that model. In other words, and I say that because oftentimes people think that note buyers they just want to chop everybody's head off and get the biggest discount possible to make the most amount of money possible. That's not true. We just don't want to. So the better the deal you bring us, the more money we're going to pay you. And you can create better deals by following the terms and outline that I gave earlier. It's when they don't follow those terms and outlines that we have to raise our yield, which lowers the price to, I say, navigate the idea of potential foreclosures and things like that.
Yeah. So is there a sweet spot for the value of the homes? I know just from doing random numbers on my own, you start pushing past 170, 190, 200,000, the monthly payments start to get exponentially higher than the average mortgage or even local neighborhood rents. Is there a sweet spot that seems to work out better than most? Because in my mind, and I haven't ran the numbers in a while, but if you have a $200,000 house and you want 10, 20%, you're looking at $10,000 or $40,000 or $20,000 or $40,000. And then if you have an 8% or 9% loan, that it's going to start pushing into like the $2,500 range after the Texas property taxes. So, is the low 100s better? Or?
The sweet spot for seller financing, I think in general, is right around 75,000 to about 175,000. Mm-hmm. That home pricing model, what I would call first-time home buyer niche, does really, really well with seller financing. If you go much above that, it starts getting into really big numbers, oftentimes which are not affordable for the borrower to keep up with. And then if you go below that, like say below 50,000, you can still do seller financing. But if you go to exit the property, the dollar amounts are so small that when you start applying discounts and yields and things like that, that the discounts seem pretty big. A $10,000 discount on a $50,000 note has a much bigger what kind of impact than a $10,000 discount on a $100,000 note, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So oftentimes those smaller note deals, they're great for seller financing if your intention is just to hold on to them for an extended period of time. Or I see a lot of guys out there buying deals where they've got 5-year balloons on them. So they're selling them. They're selling the houses to investors. The investors are coming in, working their magic, and then they make payments for 5 years, and they can pay them off early. And ultimately, it's designed as a short-term financing model versus, how you say, owner financed, owner occupied model.
Right. Okay, so you buy quite a bit of properties, and I assume you're not using your own cash. So I'm referencing the capital raising phrase you had in the beginning there. Mm-hmm. Are you doing that under or within a hedge fund type model, or how are you doing that? And I guess, what are the best strategies to not only be abiding by the laws of money raising, but how do you meet the people you raise money from? Are you raising from institutions or private investors or accredited investors?
So that's a great question. And we don't raise money from private investors, primarily because I never really went down that road. 23 years ago, when I got in the business, I was connected with a bank out of Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, to be exact. And they gave me a $500,000 line of credit to buy performing first lien residential notes. And so working with them, buying notes, simultaneous closing note deals and things like that, we'd build up portfolios and then we'd sell them off to, at the time, the Associates Financial Services, they were in Irving, Texas. They've since been, dismantled because they were bought by Sandy Weil from Citicorp, and Sandy Weil didn't like the private seller financing characteristic of that model. He just really wanted the rest of it. So he basically got rid of that and kept the rest. Kind of like Gordon Gekko would do on the movie Wall Street.
Right.
And Sandy did. So we would sell a lot of stuff to the associates in portfolio batches. That's how I got introduced to raising capital from the institutional side. From that point on, we got bigger lines of credit with that particular bank. I think we eventually got up to about $4 million. that space moved into the non-performing note space, where we raised $30 million in early '07 prior to the crash of the market, with the goal to go out and buy non-performing notes, because we could see the market was shifting from our side. And so we wanted to be the first ones to the party, which we were, because of the model we built. We were able to buy up a lot of product at about 10 to 11, 10 to 12 cents on the dollar, and built up a very big portfolio in a very short period of time. Since then, we've just kept working. I've kept working with institutions all the way up until last year. And last year we raised $2.5 billion in institutional money to buy notes and mortgages from other banks and institutions. Now, that model there is a velocity model, so it's a very different model than what we've done over the years, primarily because a velocity model is about turning money very, very quickly, not doing long hold periods, and to go out and to buy product and work off of smaller margin spreads. We've been looking at product. We haven't engaged all that capital at this point. It's there. We have the commitments. The attorneys are teed up and ready to go. But now the market's shifted again. Mm-hmm. It's shifted again. It means that the cost of product has gone up from the institutional side, which is where we spend a lot of our time buying and selling on a regular basis. So now the margins have gotten so thin that you're basically working for minimum wage at the end of the day, and yet you still have the fiduciary responsibility to manage the capital for the various investors. That's what we've done over the years. Now, is the market going to loosen up? Yeah, there's some things that are coming down the pipe here later this year where more products going to come into the space, and then we'll start engaging the capital that we've raised. That being said, I've stayed on the institutional side of it primarily because the private side comes with emotions and the institutional side does not.
Right.
But the institutional side requires a different model. It requires different things out of me and out of people that come and play on that space or in that space. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's, nicer. I'm not saying it's more effective. I'm just saying that it's a different model altogether. Whereas the private sector is one that obviously people are dealing with savings accounts. They're dumping their CDs, they're pulling IRA money out, and they're doing things along those lines. And that's a very effective model for getting, I would say, going at the end of the day. But the sooner people can shift from the private side to the institutional side, which is really wearing an entirely new hat to do so, their cost of capital gets cheaper and their ability to grow becomes exponential at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, those are significantly larger numbers than we were discussing in the beginning. So you're buying pretty large portfolios when there's the opportunity to at a discount that you're looking for.
Right.
Right. I mean, I would say, unfortunately, we're heading into it in a time where, the opportunity is going to begin to rise for, note investors like yourself. I remember even last year when we were looking to buy a house, Prime Lending was doing 3-month stated loans or stated income loans, and at decent rates. And I remember, I'm not as savvy as you are on the financial side, but I remember watching the Big Short, and I was like, man, it seems a lot like some of that crazy stuff that was going on back then.
Right.
And at that time, we had only been in business, 13 months or something. We ended up not buying a house, but I just saw some weird products being brought to us as self-employed. And
so that brings up a great point. So the stated income, stated asset market, so kind of get into some politics here, and I'm not going to go right or left. I'm just going to tell you what the facts are. So getting into what happened in the last recession, or some call it a depression, because it was actually much more costly than the Great Depression of the 1930s. So back when Clinton was in office, he was sued, the federal government was sued by a law firm out of Chicago. And the lawyer that spearheaded that lawsuit, it was a discrimination lawsuit against the federal government FHA lending model, was a gentleman by the name of Obama. So he sued the Clinton administration for discrimination, and he sued the banking institutions for discrimination against what he called minorities. And because their banking model, the algorithms in their banking model would not go below the 620 threshold. Now, banks and institutions at that time were like, if you want a loan, 2 years stated, 2 years tax returns, blah, 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 all of those things. And that was just a requirement of anybody that came to them. It had nothing to do with the color of a person's skin. It had to do whether or not you could afford that particular property, whatever it was. And we were all subject to that. It didn't matter where we came from. But nonetheless, while everybody was focused over here on the girl in the little blue dress, they were over here restructuring the banking institutions. Hence, they deregulated the banking institutions. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think, 10 days before Clinton left office, he signed executive order deregulating the banks. Freddie, Fannie, and Sally paid out $125 million to Clinton and a few other cronies, and Clinton walked away with $25 million. So if you go back to history books and you look at Clinton says, well, I don't have any money because I spent all this money on lawsuits, blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden then turns around and buys a $7 million house in New York, and everybody's like scratching their head like, I thought you had no money.
Right.
That's where it came from. So that being said, Clinton opened this massive door for the deregulation of banks and said to Freddie, Fannie, and Penny, hey, by the way, or Sally, by the way, we as the federal government will guarantee any stated or income stated asset loan that you guys do. Which, think about it. As business owners, could you imagine you and me waking up every day and we had a guaranteed mulligan for our business every single day? Like we could lose $10 million today and somebody else would pick up the tab. Mm-hmm. Well, who wouldn't want that option? At the end of the day, we do things a lot different than we do every single day. So that was an open door that got kicked open by Clinton for the banks. And lo and behold, stated income, stated asset was designed for the discriminated party, which was lower income, but was used by everybody. It didn't matter if you were worth $1 million, 10 million, or $10. Everybody was using stated income, stated asset. Why? It was easy. I didn't have to go find the last 2 years of tax returns because I can't figure out where I put the darn things after my accountant gave them to me. I have to come back and get 12 or 24 months worth of bank statements and all that other stuff. I make $6,000 a month. Great. You need to make 12. Great. The loan officers would change it. Next thing you know, the loan was done. And the federal government, aka you and me and everybody listening, we got to pick up the tax tab on that gig at the end of the day. So that being said, Clinton and Obama did this during the Clinton years. Bush took on the ownership of it. We as, homeowners and investors enjoyed the party while it lasted and were therefore, leveling up houses and buying all kinds of toys and things like that. And then the lights came on, and we all know what happens when the lights come on at the party. Everybody freezes, and the roaches take off, but there's still this huge mess that Bush inherited during his presidency. So hence therein lies the HARP Act and all of these other things that then came into play. And we as citizens now had to pick up that tab for those banks and institutions. Not to mention that the more troubled assets that the bank had on their books, the federal government was giving them a 10-to-1 ratio. So if you're Bank of America and you've got $1 billion worth of non-performing loans on your books, the feds were giving you $10 billion worth of zero interest money to use for 5 years to rebuild your business.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, and I know guys on Wall Street that purposely, these are big name companies, I'm not going to get into mentioning them, that purposely went out and bought as much non-performing product as possible, not because they were trying to save home ownership, but because they wanted to build up that side of their business to then get zero or interest-free loans from the government for 10 years that they could go use on whatever they wanted to use them on.
Mm-hmm.
So think about having $10 billion, and now all of a sudden you get $100 billion worth of free capital. And that's what the banks did. And we as homeowners are scratching our head going, man, I'm losing my house. What do I do? Can't find a job. Can't keep up. The bank's coming down, breathing down my neck. They're not modifying loans. They're not doing short sales. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. Because there was no incentive to do any of those things. There was no incentive at all. It was hence the overall nightmare. Now that being said, obviously the movie The Big Short came out and they got into the derivatives market and shorting the whole thing and penetrated the paper and all that other stuff. I won't waste the listeners' time today going and diving into that. So that being said, now we fast forward to today's model of the stated income, stated asset. Although from the outside looking in, it's like, okay, here comes that train again. The feds aren't guaranteeing the stated income, stated asset stuff anymore, which is good for you and me as taxpayers because we don't have to pick up other people's losses. And then that's number one. Number two, there are certain programs out there that are stated income, stated asset that require you to go through an entire financial education model before you can get the loan. I know B of A had set aside like $10 billion to be used in that program. And over the last 5 years, they've been doing it. They've only used up like $2.5 billion of it. So there's a different quality of underwriting associated with those borrowers.
Right.
There's some other companies that are kind of trying to make their own model and loosen it up and things like that. So from the outside looking in, it has the same title and the same name, but it's got a different exit strategy. Before the exit strategy was you and me as taxpayers. Now the exit strategy is, hey, you do it, you own it type model. And I'm sure Wall Street will get in on the gig where after the loans are seasoned, they'll do a securitization model on it. If Wall Street can make money on it, they're going to go make money on it. And that'll be passed off to or blended into other what I call full doc loans, as long as it doesn't affect the overall credit grade of the product. So that as a whole. So when that's happening, and keep in mind, Countrywide was doing 72, 73 billion a month. If you look at all the stated income, stated asset loan programs out there right now, they might, on a good month, maybe do $1 billion, maybe on a good month.
Really?
So, yeah. So although it's getting the same publicity and it's something that we learned through that recession downtime period, education process, and it has the same name, it certainly doesn't have the same exit strategy or the same volume as it used to have.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. I was thinking, I mean, something's bound to happen, but I was thinking that the world's about to crumble again for a minute there when I learned about that.
Well, the great thing about it is I think I've always felt that the stated income, stated asset definitely has a place in the lending world. Mm-hmm. I think it was heavily abused in the last go-round. And therefore, I think the newer restrictions that have been put upon it and the fact that the feds aren't using taxpayer money to guarantee the bank's success is a good thing. But I still think that there's a niche in the marketplace for that. Like, my boys over at Morgan, they're creating a model that's a stated income model for entrepreneurs. And they're rolling it out like really slowly. Like they're going into certain marketplaces and they're giving it to very, very specific mortgage brokers, mortgage lenders, and they're doing massive background checks on these guys before they give them the key to the green light to the lending model. So they're not just like casting it out there nationwide. And one of it, they want to make sure that all their I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and they want to see how this thing performs. Will it perform based on the outline and the business model that they've created at the end of the day? So,
right.
Pretty cool stuff.
No, I like conversations like this where I get to gather, the bird's eye view of everything. Because if I go into, the great world of Google and I try to learn these things, either I'm not capturing the right information, or it's just like one in the ear out of the other, or just straight over my head. And so I love the conversations like these where I get to learn from somebody that has seen the ins and outs.
Yeah, I think the thing that what I encourage investors to do is and it's easy to look and, somebody will write an article for whatever magazine or talking about, the next crash coming upon us. And then some people are like, yeah, here we go. We're going to make some money.
Right.
Keep in mind, when those crashes happen, the economic impact that it has nationwide in every economic category is just devastating. And people are thinking, well, we're just going to scoop up tons of properties. No, you're not. Let me tell you the flip side of that. That money, that easy money they're getting out of private investors and out of Wall Street and stuff gets all puckered up really fast when that happens. So, yeah, there might be more deals, but now there's no cash. Right now there's a lot of cash and less deals, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So and if you don't believe me, go back to 07, 08, 09, when there was a ton of opportunities and foreclosures in the marketplace, but there was nobody buying these things. These things were sitting in high-end neighborhoods and low-end neighborhoods and middle-income class neighborhoods, and they were just sitting there, these properties sitting there vacant for months and years and things like that, because capital-wise, the capital wasn't convinced that it was a safe place to park it. Right now, we've kind of come out of that season. We've come out of that era, and capital feels confident that real estate is solid, which is a good thing. Now, the downside of that is deals might be harder to find. The margins might be a little bit smaller, which requires us as entrepreneurs and business owners to tweak our business model and to, adapt our business model with the true marketplace versus creating a business model based on hope and wishes and dreams that something's going to happen and we're going to be the first one at the party. There's not enough indication in the market space for another crash to come. I mean, you have to look at the cycles of the economy, and the cycle, we typically run on 40-year cycles as an economy. And we just came out of one in 2013, and we're probably not going to see one till probably 2040-ish timeframe, 2038 or so, something like what we just went through at the end of the day. And you can do that. You can just, if you just go back to the 1930 Great Depression, when was the next one? 1970. Why 1970? The oil embargo. What happened after that? You just kind of keep rolling it through all the way through. And it's about every 40 years. So 1930, 1970, 2007.
Interesting. Okay, so the 7-year cycle, the 7 to 9 year cycle, I hear a lot of people talking about. That's on a smaller scale, or just small corrections. In the 40-year one you're talking about is the big boys that really annihilate the country.
Exactly. Those 7 to 10 year cycles, we have them here in Arizona as well. You'll see certain industries that'll pump the brake, whether that's building, technology, medical, and that's just, you'll typically see 1% to 2% corrections in that marketplace that will tend to get everybody's attention. It doesn't tend to crash the marketplace, but it's definitely an attention getter. And that typically shows up in the form of slower paying on invoices, slower paying on projects. Projects don't tend to get off the ground as quick. The city, the municipalities are not passing bond issues and things like that. They're not approving new projects. And that'll typically happen for about 12 to 18 months. And then it'll settle back down and it'll start growing again. And that's it's actually a good thing. It's kind of like driving down the freeway at 100 miles an hour. At some point, you kind of want to pump the brakes and bring it back down to 75 for a little bit, maybe even 65.
Right.
Up to 100.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when in 07, 8, and 9, I was living in Maricopa, just south of you.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. D.R. Horton was, trying to flash sell these houses. I remember houses up the street, because we bought a model home for like $125,000. Now it's probably worth $250,000. But I remember 1,500 square foot houses, just a few houses over, were being sold for $55,000, brand new. I was like, oh man. And I wasn't in real estate then. It all looked cool, and I wish I had $55,000 then. But man, the D.R. Horton had full tracts being built, and the center block walls around the whole community, and like 6 houses out of the 300 built, and just sat vacant for years. It was an amazing scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's only been, I would say, being here in Arizona and being a native, I would say that it's only been probably in the last 3 years where you've really started to see those abandoned projects disappear. And there's still a couple of them that are like kind of off the beaten path. Like there's one over here by Chandler Hospital that they started building a shopping center. And they put in the curbs in the street, or the concrete curbing and stuff, and moving dirt, started putting the electrical boxes. And it's been sitting there like that since, I don't know, 2008, 2007. It's been sitting there. And I just noticed the other day, I drove by and they put in like 5 palm trees, but the palm trees don't have any water on them. So the palm trees are dying. So I'm not really sure what the process was on that. That was $10,000 out the door. So there's still some pockets here in Maricopa. I just drove through there Sunday coming back from Mexico, and it's definitely recovered fairly well. And there's a lot of new stores and things like that have been built up. Of course, it's got your neighborhood staple Starbucks and Jimmy John's sandwich shop and stuff like that. But it was definitely a ghost town. And you're right. There was a lot of houses out there. I remember seeing $400,000 or $500,000 houses, which would have been the Taj Mahal out there in Maricopa, selling for $120, $150 all day long. And some people bought them. And good stuff.
Right after we bought ours, it got a little bit worse. And I remember some houses being sold for what we bought, 120, 140, 150. They're like 5,000 square foot houses with like custom theaters upstairs.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, man, why did we buy this one? It's got granite and stuff. It's kind of cool looking, but it doesn't have the theater upstairs. And I remember the opportunity, again, not being a real estate, I wish I would have been at the time, because like you said, a lot of them were being bought at 100, 150, and now they're worth 300, 400, 500,000 in some of those neighborhoods. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there was crazy opportunity, not only here but just nationwide. But the money, the capital to buy those things was puckered up. It was tight pulling money out of people, because nobody had a clue on how long it was going to last, or when it was going to start coming out. And if you think about it, it happened, technically speaking, it happened in February of 2007, but they didn't officially announce it. And they quietly announced it in December of 2007, and then it really became popular in 2008 in kind of everybody's radar. But we didn't really come out of it, at least here in Arizona, until like 2012, maybe even 13, started coming out of it and started building traction again. So it was about a 5-year process.
Yeah. Arizona got hit pretty hard from what I could tell.
Yeah, we like a house, to give you a perfect example, and then oftentimes people say, well, the market's corrected, it's solid, it's perfect again, and everybody's making money. Well, there was a house that I had that I bought in '03, and I was going to sell it in '06. I put it on the market I bought it in '03 for $240. I put it on the market in '06 for $630 is what I wanted for it. And I built another house that I moved into in '06 as well, in November of '06. So I was going to sell it and move the money over. Long story short, I ended up not selling the house. I had 5 offers, the highest one being like 610, and I didn't accept it. I wanted my 630. I wasn't getting it, so I'll just keep the house. Both a good and bad decision at the end of the day. The bad decision was I probably should have sold it for 610, because even today, 2019, that house is for 475. Bless you, 475. And so we've never gotten back to that 620, 630 mark on that particular property.
Yeah.
I sold that house last year 2017. I sold the house for 455 is what I sold it for. The new homeowners made about 20 grand in 2 years. And that was after fully remodeling the inside, minus cabinets, more cosmetic stuff, redoing my front yard landscaping. And I was getting ready to redo the pool in 17, but I sold it before I did that. Point being is that even 13 years later, or 10 years later, 10, 11 years later, 14 years later, 14 years later, from '06 to 2017, it still never recovered. It was, we were still $200,000 short, a little bit less, but we were still $200,000 short from what it was at the peak. So when people say, well, the market's recovered, it hasn't gone all the way back to that peak that it once was, which is actually a positive thing. It's actually a great thing for all of us, because you don't have that crazy pendulum swinging motion going on. You've got this kind of seesaw, motion going on, which is perfect for building wealth. If you just, build a model that accommodates that at the end of the day.
Right.
It takes a little more work, but it's still more solid.
Yeah. Well, let's touch on your book real quick. I haven't read it. Power Paper, me being in real estate. I know the paper, you're talking about notes, you're talking about being the bank at that point, and it's been the discussion for the past hour here. But you want to give us a little snippet about that and where we can find it?
Yeah. So Power Paper, you can find it on Amazon. Just go to Power Paper, Troy Fullwood, and it'll pull up the book. You can get it in Kindle version, or you can get it in the hardback, the paperback version. This took me, it's been on my list of things to do. Guys can relate to this, and their wives can certainly relate to this. It's been on my 10-year list of things to do. And I finally put it together about a year ago. Actually, the 1-year anniversary was last month. Awesome. And it was a bestseller in 3 different categories: real estate investing, mortgages, and ethics on Amazon. The cool thing about it is that not only do you learn about what it is that we do in investing and buying notes and mortgages, and some of the things that we recommend people do on a regular basis, way outside of just the best practices that I gave you today, but there's an entire free course training of like 50 videos on how to do deal structure, how to find notes if you want to go out and buy them on your own. I think they're a great way to build wealth for people, whether you're buying 1 or 2, or I think they're great for, even doing college funds for kids, because I see notes in every denomination, $10,000 notes to $1 million notes, and they're everywhere in between. But the point being is that go to Amazon.com, Power Paper, Troy Fullwood, grab yourself a copy of it, sign up for the free training. There's no credit cards. We don't want your money. We're just like, here, ladies and gentlemen, here's what the banks are doing, and here's what you can do on your own as well.
Yeah, and that's not a skinny book. I mean, that took some time, huh?
Yeah, there's 100 and some odd pages in there, and there's other courses in there if you want to buy them. They're there, but that's not my purpose. really, to put something together that helps people, one, understand the business, two, apply the business, and then three, to use the business to grow their own net worth and generational wealth.
Oh, that's awesome. When you said 50 plus free videos.
Yeah, there's like 50 plus free videos, and they're like 10 to 20 minute long videos as a whole. They're just topic matters all the way through.
Yeah.
So you can start and stop them. You can ask questions. We answer questions when people ask them. You can email us questions. We'll answer those as well.
No, that's awesome. That's great value.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, you've been on my social experiment, but first let's get your best contact. So is it Facebook, Instagram? How do you want people to reach out to you?
Well, they can reach out to me on Facebook. I have a personal profile, Troy Fullwood, on Facebook. We also have a business profile, Pinnacle Investments, or they can go to our corporate site, which is pinnacle-investments.com. And there's some more tools there. There talks about notes as well as our contact information. They can email our office, or if they have a question, they can call. If we have time, we'll certainly reach back out and return their call.
Okay. And then, like I was saying before, you were in my social experiment. You haven't got that video edited yet, but on every single podcast, I ask everybody or the guest, if you had 6 months to live, what would you do with it? And your version will be out soon, but for those listening to the podcast, again, if you had 6 months to live, what do you think you would do with it?
For me personally, I would just focus on family. I would shut down the business. I would, obviously maintain the friendships that I have, and really just enjoy the time with my kids. Having the kids that I have, and I'm blessed that I get to spend a lot of time with them during the day, taking them to and from school and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I would pack them up and let's go travel. I would definitely go see the world with them, places that have been on my bucket list as a whole. I would definitely do that, as well as I'd find things to do of service. Like, how can we serve people? We've been very blessed as a family. We're very blessed. People in America are very blessed. And I think it's part of being successful.
Yep.
You have to help other people and show them, and just be with them a lot of the time. So some cool stuff. I'd also probably figure out a way to build some kind of shelter or something to help battered women. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I would probably figure out something to do there, or leave some money to do that as a whole. Yeah.
That's very similar. It's almost identical to what I would do, family, vacation, and then figure out how to, because like you said, America, we're spoiled. We don't have too many areas where we're impoverished comparable to third world countries. And that's a big mission of mine and Ashley's, is just to go to those areas. You've probably seen on Facebook, we're going to Peru in July, and then we're going to Nigeria in September.
Wow.
We want to be able to, give back if it's just time. I've been asked in the Nigeria trip to talk on business and entrepreneurship to the young men out there.
Nice.
So even if we just teach them a little bit to help them in their lives, but we're handing out the water filters and all that stuff too. But if I had 6 months to live, it's exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be taking the girls with me, and we'd be going to help these families and kids and women out there.
Absolutely. I think, it's part of leaving a legacy. And I think when you get to, when you've been through the things that you and I have been through, and you are successful at making money, then you start looking at other ways to leave an impact and to leave a legacy, and to role model for not only your children, but for the other people that are watching, how that would look and how that would break down at the end of the day. So.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it, Troy. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Sorry to keep you so long. It went pretty long there, but I appreciate all the knowledge. I certainly learned a lot. I'll definitely be grabbing the book, and I know the audience appreciates it, especially from someone with such great knowledge. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my honor. It's been a pleasure being here. I hope everybody listening has got a few nuggets, a few insights to not only the business, but maybe some things that they can apply to improve not only their business, but leave a legacy for your kids or their kids, and go forward from there. So appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Ray.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.